Lara Croft is back in Tomb Raider Underworld, her 9th adventure and her 2nd appearance on the Wii, a console that desperately needs a few more recognisable franchises aboard. The game starts swiftly with a bewildering flashback to the previous instalment that sets the trend for the rest of the game's cutscenes. It's an annoyingly written and voiced info dump that occurs almost arbitrarily and has as good a chance of confusing you as it does of enlightening you. But who cares? This is a video game, and within seconds of the cutscene ending you'll be running, climbing and swinging through an exploding mansion using a set of largely intuitive controls. Okay, there are the usual annoying moments of nunchuck shaking that designers shoehorn awkwardly into games simply to make Wii owners wish that they'd bought an Xbox, but in general the controls make sense and respond the way you'd want them to. Sadly, the same can't be said of the camera. If it can possibly reorient itself in such a way as to turn forwards into backwards whilst you're stood teetering above a fiery abyss, then it will. If it can close in for a tight shot of Lara's face right when it would be handy for you to be able to scan the room you've just entered, ditto. It's lucky that the controls are so sensible, as you'll be using them all the time to change the camera angle. The story mixes a few whiffs of Arthurian legend with a sizable chunk of Norse mythology and a lot of Far Eastern tourism, as Lara sets off to track down her mother, previously presumed dead but now hinted to be living in the land of Avalon. To get there, Lara will need to find Thor's hammer, whilst also foiling the schemes of a variety of plummy-voiced antagonists and solving lots of puzzles, most of which are difficult enough to be enthralling without ever crossing the line into frustrating. Sadly, there are a few Wii-specific motion puzzles that are almost insultingly easy, but in general, the fetch, fit and fiddle aspect of the tasks will keep you hooked enough that you'll be able to ignore the slightly disjointed feel of the story progression. Graphically, it's a solid presentation, albeit one that's a little lacking in detail. Everything looks a little unambitious, a little unfinished. But this strangely works in the game's favour, as there are none of those awkwardly flat attempts at texture that normally litter Wii games as if to remind you of how sharp they'd look on an Xbox. Instead, everything's smooth and slightly cartoonish, and features just enough detail to let you differentiate between interactive objects and background scenery. The game makes some ambitious efforts to merge the running, climbing, fighting and puzzling aspects into combined set pieces that should allow Lara to do anything in the game that she could logically do in real life. Sadly, this actually leads to some decidedly difficult attempts to run and fight simultaneously, and results in numerous frustrating and unfair deaths. The exploration aspect of the game is also a tad underwhelming. It's hard not to think of recent games such as Call of Duty 5, in which you wanted to explore the environments but couldn't due to the fast pace of the action. In Tomb Raider Underworld, the opposite is true. The action frequently slackens off enough to let you explore to your heart's content, only to discover that there's just not that much to see. Despite all that, there are reasons why the Tomb Raider series is so successful, and those reasons are largely intact in Underworld. No, I'm really not talking about Lara's tight t-shirt. I mean the constant sense of progress through a variety of tomb, jungle and underwater levels in brief, alternating bursts of puzzling, pathfinding and action. Underworld brings nothing new to reinvigorate the series, but it keeps you plugging along and rewards your efforts with a genuine sense of accomplishment. It's a game that's marred by numerous failings, but none of them are mortal wounds. We wouldn't pay full price for it, but if you see it on a discount shelf you'll feel like you got a really good deal.